Osborne's austerity is a lie. It always was and it always will be. But the man is neither stupid nor incompetent. Your agenda has always been to crush the nation's workers into submission and create the biggest land grab in UK history, presided over by merciless sociopaths. The only way you could possibly get away with destroying the welfare state, selling off the nation's assets, the greatest of which is the NHS, privatising public services, severing the fundamental link between work and pay, and removing support for the sick and disabled, was the imposition of sustained austerity. In those terms, Osborne is a roaring success. Indeed, you and your government are an astonishing success. As long as you can maintain the lie through disinformation, spin and deception, you can reap the rewards of a job well done. However, sustaining a lie is hard work, and the longer it is maintained, the greater the risk that it's all going to come apart. All that stands between you and ruin is a tissue of lies that only bear fruit through a lack of public attention and scrutiny, the acquiescence of the gullible, and the endorsement of the self-serving and the selfish. Sadly, they're still in the majority, and it therefore falls to the few to challenge the many and the powerful. Challenge we will, and challenge we must, for a lie cannot last forever.
Just on pure economic grounds, austerity is no way to get out of a crisis. It just makes it worse. And you can see it the last few years. And in fact, the ECB has sort of pulled back from it. The IMF has pulled back from it. You probably saw the recent, somewhat hushed-up scandal here about the famous Rossi and Rogoff article, which was used as the intellectual foundation of the austerity programs. It turns out they made some arithmetical errors. When you correct them, it shows... A student found it, and then a couple of faculty members joined in and published a paper about it. But the general reaction is, well, it's still true that debt harms growth, which it does in the long run. But as Keynes said, in the long run, we're all dead. It doesn't in the short run. In fact, it's probably a good thing. It's one of the ways to encourage demand. Deficit, that is a way to encourage demand at a time when nothing else is doing it.
We can't all do it at once. There's a problem of composition. If everybody tries to save at once, there's no income from which to save. So you have to think about the relationship between spending and saving. While it makes sense to save, while it makes sense to clear your balance sheet of your company or a state, or balance your budget in general of your household, if we all try to do it at one time, then all you do is shrink the economy. It's a very simple way to think about this. Imagine a simple sum, a fraction, right? And on the top you got the numerator, and on the bottom you got the denominator. So the top is the amount of debt you've got, and then the bottom is your GDP, how much of the economy you've got. If everyone cuts and GDP gets smaller, what happens to the size of the debt relatively? It gets bigger. And every country in Europe that's undergone an austerity programme now has more debt, much more than when they started. So if the point of the whole thing is to reduce debt, it's literally pointless if everyone tries to do it simultaneously. Who are the people who actually rely on government services? They're the people at the bottom end of the income distribution, not the people at the top. And the people at the top are the ones who, frankly, have made out like bandits over the past 30 years of the financialisation of the economy. They're the ones, the creditors, who the low inflation regime has benefited. They produce the debt that masks the maldistribution of income right across all those OECD countries. And now, after bailing out the assets of the very people who created the debt, we're now going to say to the people who didn't benefit, you're the ones who need to pay. Well, that produces a very toxic and very dangerous politics. You have a kind of creditor-debtor standoff where those who can pay don't want to, and those who can't pay are being asked to. Look at the Italian elections. That's where this is the first round of this, and it could get potentially much worse. And that's what the lessons of history certainly tell us. If you really think about it, the whole notion of businesses waiting inside, sitting on piles of capital, waiting to invest, right? That's all true. Why are they doing this? Because they're uncertain about Obamacare. Well, only one country has Obamacare, and you've got lots of countries in recession. So what's really behind this? The actual argument for confidence goes like this. So imagine that the government decides to cut spending, and I'm a consumer, just your average consumer. Well, I look at my lifetime budget, and I say, hey, these guys are going to spend less money in the future, that means I have less taxes in the future, that means I have more money now, so despite the economy falling around my ears, I'm going to go out and spend more money now and cure the recession while it's ongoing. That's nonsense. No one acts a wonderful modelling contrivance if you're an economist, but it's a nonsense in terms of how it actually plays out in the world. So the confidence fairy is a fairy story. It produces toxic politics, and it doesn't work if everyone does it at the same time.
Well, if there's austerity pushed through, what's going to happen? More people in the public service are going to lose their jobs. More of those people that lose their jobs will either become unemployed or go into lower wage or even 0 hours contracts, therefore paying less in tax. So we end up actually deflating and reducing the economy of this country. We're running a debt of about 80% to GDP figures. Post-war Labour government had a debt figure of 250%, albeit a much smaller economy at that time. They saw their way out of it to invest. They saw that way out of that was to grow the economy. Now, what we're doing is putting a burden on the current generation. We're putting a burden on those that have nowhere to live. We're putting a burden on those that are on low wages, of young people leaving university with huge debts. We're putting a burden on the present generation. Take it over the longer period. Protect this generation and develop so that the next generation is better off.
Seeing a subclass being created with people now being driven into real poverty in our country, and we've seen the expectation with the £30 billion cuts to public services and welfare the government are planning to introduce in just the next 2.5 years.
You can't think about the economy and the government's role in the economy like a child might think about a household budget, which is all that's being sold by the politicians of both sides. And it is the public debt it's a sign of the state of the economy, but it's not a cause of the state of the economy. And by focusing on that and trying to reduce the public debt, they're likely to push the economy, first of all, into another slump, but also, if they actually succeeded in holding that level of service they're both fantasising about, they'd cause the next financial crisis that way, or cause a serious decline in economic activity. They certainly won't cause what they both argue will cause, which is sustained economic growth.
That this is going to be an all-out attack on ordinary working people, and we've already seen the longest fall in living standards for the majority, while the richest doubled their wealth in the last Parliament. This government now is more confident than it's ever been before. How bad does it have to get?
That it was not a matter of whether, but only a matter of when the mass of people being asked by austerity policies basically to bear most of the pain caused by the bankers and by the big businesses that brought us this crisis and that made sure that the bailouts helped them and bypassed everybody else. This is a vote of people who say, we've had it, we've been through 6 years of economic hell, and we don't want to continue, and we will not, as long as democratic voting is enabling us to point in a new direction.